Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight and an honor and very timely for us to have with us today Dr. Gerard Lameiro. He's an author, a philosopher, an economist, an engineer. He's authored quite a few books. You perhaps have seen him on television or heard him on some of the popular radio talk shows. He does about 400 media interviews a year, and what a delight and an honor and timely to have him today. By the way, his website, you may want to check it out. It's very resourceful. GreatNewsForAmerica.com. GreatNewsForAmerica.com. Dr. Lameiro, nice to see you. How you doing, my friend?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
Good. Kind of interesting. You and I are chatting, and Director Comey is taking some heated questions. Have you had a chance to review any of that this morning?
Yeah, I did, but of course I broke away to come over to my little TV studio here, mini studio, and be on your program. But there was something very revealing in those first few minutes. We may want to talk about that.
Go ahead. What did you hear and see?
Well, you know, the chairman and that asked a lot of pointed questions about did Hillary do anything wrong, and did the FBI look at her public statements versus her statements to the FBI, and they said no. But then a more pointed question, he said, did the FBI investigate her claims made before Congress in testimony versus what she said to the FBI? And he said no. And the chairman said, well, why didn't you look at her statements before Congress? He said there was no referral from Congress. And the chairman said, shot back, you'll have a referral in a few hours.
Whoa.
Which opens up another possible investigation, really.
I would imagine. All right. So overall, Dr. Lameiro, what did you think of this conclusion from Director Comey? It's like he laid out all the reasons why she should be indicted, but he made the judgment that it wasn't intentional. Really? What do you think?
That isn't even the point. The statute in question goes to gross negligence. It does not require intent. That's a different standard. If somebody intends to cause the nation harm, understandably, that's a pretty serious matter. But this particular statute in question simply said, was there gross negligence in the handling of classified information? And I think virtually everyone that I've heard on TV since, and some of the top prosecutors and that are nationally known, indicated they probably would have prosecuted. And he made the statement, which was somewhat bizarre, that no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute. Well, we can send him a list of all the people that would.
So what's going on here from your perspective?
Well, as the chairman said in the hearings, about an hour ago or so, he said it looks like there's a double standard, that if you're politically well connected, that there's one standard, and if you're just an average person, there's another standard for how you interpret the law. And of course, those of us, such as myself, who are strong believers in the Constitution and the rule of law, think every person, even the king, so to speak, is not above the law. We are all under the law, equal protection under the law. So I think a lot of us are concerned for the constitutional implications. I mean, if someone's going to spend 4 years placing classified information potentially and other information and government business on a non-secure, unclassified system, aren't they putting people at risk, including people's lives at risk who might be involved in covert operations, for example?
Yes, and I guess this opens up so many things. If this thing isn't really retried, does that open up the door for those who've been guilty or found guilty of the same crime at a lesser degree? Does it open the door for them to appeal?
Possibly. Remember, General Petraeus got in deep trouble because he gave one document to his girlfriend to use in a publication, and that was deemed to be an offense, and he paid a price for it. And here we have, let's see, there were 30,000 work emails, somewhere in that order of magnitude. 110 were found to be classified documents at the time they were sent or received, which, by the way, contradicts what Hillary said in public statements, that there were no classified documents that went through her private email server. But indeed, we see the FBI saying they found 110. 8 of them were classified as top secret. Some of them were classified as top secret SAP, which is the highest level of top secrecy there is. And that's really something. And then we also have the FBI saying that, you know, they believe hostile actors could have got at that information, even though there's no evidence. But he said, we don't expect evidence of a hostile actor doing that, because they're smart enough not to leave tracks when they go into somebody's computer. They can get the information and leave without leaving forensic information to pick out, you know, which nation might have got her documents. It's possible that some of these documents are not only at the FBI's headquarters, but also maybe in Moscow or Beijing or somewhere else, maybe Tehran.
How can Director Comey possibly come up with the conclusion that he did?
Well, basically, and I heard this just this morning about an hour ago in his testimony, that he said that that people are reluctant to use this statute unless there's intent to damage the country, and he didn't see that Hillary outwardly, overtly indicated she intended to hurt the country by doing it. It was more for her convenience, that she thought it was more convenient to keep the documents in her possession. In her own server, the server resided primarily in her basement of her house, I think in Chappaqua, New York, or maybe it was her house in Washington, D.C. area.
All right, so that brings it back to gross negligence.
Well, that's why I started my article this week. You know, I do an article every Monday, and I said, gross negligence is gross negligence, right? And I really meant that, meaning, well, you know, this is so clear. I don't see how you don't slap her hand and say, you shouldn't be doing this. And this went on for 4 years. And by the way, another interesting point that I learned was that during the 4 years, she never appointed an inspector general. The State Department's supposed to have an inspector general, and an inspector general would have caught this kind of action where somebody is violating the rules of the State Department, not to mention classified documents law. And the inspector general wasn't there because that person was never appointed, and they therefore were not there to kind of rein in these kind of actions.
I heard earlier, because I've been on the air most of the morning, but I've been in and out of the hearing. I did hear Director Comey say that the server set up in the house was originally set up by her husband, and she conveniently went ahead and used that. What does that tell you?
He has more talent than we're aware of. He's also an admin, a system admin.
You just can't think this stuff up. All right, so what happens? Is there any possibility that this conclusion can go another direction?
Oh, I think so. I think there are a lot of directions it can take. Well, first of all, we have a new possible criminal referral from Congress to the FBI, meaning they have to open it up again and say, well, did she lie before Congress? Was she under oath at the time? That could be, I think, perjury in most people's book if you lied before Congress, because their information apparently contradicted her testimony, is what the chairman was indicating. So that's a new corner right there. Other things that could happen, I follow very closely the presidential election. I wrote a book, Great News for America, on the presidential election that came out in January. And there's still a possibility she's in enough trouble that the superdelegates could back away from her and Joe Biden could come in and get the nomination. And that's still, to me, up in the air.
I want to get into that. We'll take a break and we'll come back and get into your book. Isn't it interesting, Dr. Lameiro? I don't mean to laugh here, but you just can't think this stuff up. Her husband gets impeached for perjury, and now she gets hung for perjury before Congress. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, tragedy borders on comedy. So it's okay to laugh.
All right, thank you. Let me take a quick break. By the way, you can go to his website, greatnewsforamerica.com, which is also the title of his book. When we come back, we'll talk to Dr. Lameiro about his book coming up in just a moment.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back, and what a delight and an honor, and very timely for us to have with us today Dr. Gerard Francis Lameiro. He's an author, a philosopher, an economist, an engineer. He's authored a book you may want to get a copy of. It's called Great News for America. That also is the website, very resourceful, greatnewsforamerica.com. And his latest article is Gross Negligence is Gross Negligence, right? And you need to get a copy of this article because the way he spells it out, there is so much information in this. What is gross negligence? And then he deals with all of the list of the issues that certainly back that up. So you may want to get a copy of that. Dr. Lameiro, let's get into your book. Tell us about it, and what is the good news?
Well, great news, not just good news. I thought last year, round about March of 2015, that this year's election, 2016, was going to be an important presidential election. I saw it in the numbers. I saw it in a lot of ways. And I went back and I researched 240 years of American history, and I looked at every very important presidential election. And there are some that are historic and some that are critical. This one is both historic and critical. And what do I mean by those terms? Listeners may not pick up on it immediately. Historic means a record voter turnout. I predicted in the book, and it's coming true, that this would be a historic presidential election in terms of voter turnout. Look around the country. For example, Texas, in the Republican primary, 1 million more voters than the previous high. That's historic, 1 million. So I'm predicting a record turnout this year. The second thing is critical. This is a critical presidential election, and by that I mean things like the following. The political parties as we know it will end, and they will be different as a result of this election. The Republican Party is in the process of realigning and redefining itself. So is the Democratic Party. You look at Bernie Sanders. That is evidence that the Democratic Party is rejecting the establishment of the Democratic Party. They're not happy. And I go through in great detail in the book about the kinds of changes we should expect, and they all seem to be coming true. I had some excited radio host recently saying, well, everything you're saying is coming true. How can this be? Yeah. And I said, well, I just look at the data and try to tell you what I see. And so this book makes 10 predictions that are bold, that are things that will happen before, during, and after the election. So far, they're all coming true.
All right, let's go through a couple of those. And you mentioned just a few moments ago, and by the way, as we speak, Director Comey is being, before a select committee in the House, being questioned about how he came to his conclusion. You went on to say that if out of this comes an additional charge, perhaps perjury, from Congress, that the superdelegates could possibly throw Hillary out and go for Joe?
Oh, absolutely. The superdelegates are folks that are elected officials of the Democratic Party, and a lot of them hold public office, and some of them are statesmen, so to speak, in the party. Bill Clinton is a superdelegate from New York. He's kind of an elder statesman in the Democratic Party. These people are not bound in the sense of having been run through a primary. In general, they are free to vote their conscience, so to speak, and their job is to pick the best Democratic nominee they can pick. And up until recently, they thought that would be Hillary Clinton. But given the long list of problems, she's not the best candidate. She's not liked. Her trust levels are low. This is going to further deteriorate her trustworthy numbers, because here we've got the FBI running down a laundry list, and almost everything he says, she said the opposite in public. let alone maybe some of it in testimony before Congress. And so it makes her look less and less honest. Well, I'll tell you, the American people will accept a lot of flaws in a candidate, but one of the things they rarely vote for is someone they don't trust.
Yeah.
So she is hurting herself throughout this process. And by the way, that's probably the reason this whole thing took place surrounding the July 4th weekend, because so many people are on vacation, so many people are distracted. They go to fireworks displays, they go to picnics, whatever, family outings. And so this was timed to come out to do the least damage to Clinton as possible.
If Joe Biden was to get drafted in, they're saying the Biden ticket, especially if you got Elizabeth Warren to be the VP, is that formidable enough to give Trump a headache?
You're saying a Biden-Warren ticket?
Yep. Yeah.
No, not at all. Because of the fact it's a historic record turnout, and the book goes through the underlying reasons why it's historic and what the significance of the actual vote is. It is so skewed toward conservative principles. People want to eliminate corruption from government. They want to eliminate favoritism. And here we've got Hillary getting this, this possible favorable treatment from the FBI. Regardless of what Democrat wins, I don't see how they can beat someone who sounds conservative. And Trump, while not an ideological conservative, is definitely saying conservative principles. He wants to strengthen the military. He wants to protect the American people from attacks like in San Bernardino and in Orlando. He wants to do things like cut taxes. He wants to appoint conservative Supreme Court justices, which is those 4 or 5 Supreme Court justices the next president is going to appoint, it's going to make it a conservative Supreme Court. On the other hand, if Hillary were to get in, it's going to be a far left Supreme Court. So the preponderance, I think, of evidence is it's going to be an overwhelming win for whoever the Republican nominee is.
Because most of those turnouts were higher on the Republican side than they were on the Democratic side, right, for the primary?
Yeah, overall, they were much higher on the Republican side and much lower on the Democratic side. That's also an indication of who's going to come out and vote in November.
Yeah. Give us a few of your predictions without giving away the whole book.
Oh, well, I wrote the book so people would get the knowledge, and even if they don't buy it, it's okay. The answer is, well, first, it's a historic election. Number 2, it's going to be the equivalent of a conservative landslide. Whoever gets elected is going to be conservative, or they're not going to get elected. And that could still mean a third party if someone did not deem Trump conservative, if the American people didn't. But it looks like he said enough conservative things. Another thing is the end of the Republican Party as we know it, the end of the Democratic Party as we know it. Another prediction I make is about the Supreme Court. We will have a Supreme Court that is conservative until the year 2050, because we have 4 Supreme Court justice vacancies that'll be coming up, most likely in the next few years. Clarence Thomas has recently indicated quietly that he does not plan to stay there until he dies. So that may be a 5th Supreme Court justice. The average Supreme Court justice lasts about 30 years before they leave office. So the people appointed in the next few years, let's say we round it off to 2020, that by 2020 we have a whole new Supreme Court, they'll be in place until 2050. That's 30 years. That is going to change the nature of the country. It's going to change. I will predict now, this is not in the book, but I will predict now Roe v. Wade will fail in the Supreme Court. In other words, it's going to be overturned finally, and the pro-life forces will win. You can see other types of law. The gun law people who are trying to get rid of guns in America, that's going to fail in the Supreme Court if it's a conservative Supreme Court, which I predict it will be. That's why I said this is great news for America, because the Constitution will come back in full force. The rule of law will come back. We will see more morality, more freedom, and we're going to have a much more robust economy. This is the worst recession, and I'm an economist. This is the worst recession in 70 years. Wow. We have not recovered from it. And the worst recovery from a recession in 70 years. That is going to change if we change our economic policies.
Well, Dr. Lameiro, that is great news.
That's why I called it that.
Great news for America. That's the name of the book, or the title of the book, Great News for America by Dr. Lameiro. Look for that. GreatNewsForAmerica.com is the website. Isn't it interesting that in this chaotic time in which we live, that the people want law and order and the government doesn't?
Well, you know why? Because when government gets big, it gets corrupt. It has gotten too big under this progressive socialist trend that's been taking place for years. And I go through those trends, too, in the book to explain why are we where we are today and how is it going to get fixed. But I will tell you this, in studying presidential elections since 1789, I've looked at every important election. The American people wake up whenever their government turns immoral or turns against their freedom. And they have woken up this year. They are coming out. And the Christian vote is going to be dramatically conservative. And it's going to make a huge difference. And this is what's happened. 1896 is the last election. It was this big. 1896, it's just incredible what an election that was. And we have one just like that now, where the people are coming out because they are angry and upset, and they want to fix the problems and save this country. And you know what? They're the most powerful people on earth, the American voters.
Well, Dr. Lameiro, you are a delight and inspiring. Thank you for the uplifting news. I hope folks buy your book. It's called Great News for America. Check it out. And GreatNewsForAmerica.com. Let's stay connected, all right? As this thing progresses, let's see how your 10 predictions go.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to be on.
All right. Nice to see you. Thanks. Have a great day, my friend.
You too. You have a great day, and God bless all of you and your listeners.
Thank you so much. Same to you. All right. We'll be right back.